The legal notice sat on my kitchen table, its bright white paper looking completely out of place against the dark, worn wood. I didn't need to read past the first paragraph to feel the air leave my lungs. The words, "lawsuit filed" and "grand fraud" were printed in bold black ink, staring back at me like an executioner's blade. My former boss, Arthur Vance, the brilliant multimillionaire CEO of Vance Financial Group, was suing me for $12 million. He was accusing me of siphoning corporate investments into a secret personal account over the last 3 years. If Arthur won this case, I wouldn't just lose my career as a senior financial auditor. I would lose my home, my life savings, and my freedom. I would be completely ruined, left with a broken name that no company in the world would ever trust again. Through the large window of my apartment, I could see the bright lights of the city skyline, and right in the center was the massive glass and steel tower of Vance Financial Group. I could almost picture Arthur sitting in his penthouse office, sipping his expensive scotch, and sharing a dark, victorious laugh with his high-priced legal team. Arthur was a master chess player in the corporate world. He was a man who didn't just fire his enemies, he completely erased them so they could never speak the truth. He thought he had built the perfect, airtight trap for me. He had spent months manipulating the company's internal digital ledgers, wiping out my administrative access codes, and planting a fabricated electronic paper trail that made my personal laptop look like the origin point of a massive embezzlement scheme. He believed I was just a quiet, submissive math mind who would break down into tears, sign a forced confession, and take the blame for his crimes just to make the terrifying pressure stop. But as I stood in my quiet kitchen, the initial wave of absolute panic completely melted away. It was replaced by a cold, sharp, and beautiful sense of absolute focus. Arthur was incredibly clever, but he had made one fatal, arrogant mistake. He truly believed that because he owned the main corporate servers, he owned reality. He had no idea that for 3 long years, sensing the dark corruption growing inside his inner circle, I had been keeping a second, completely separate account of my own. Hidden beneath the floorboards of my study was an ancient, leather-bound book, my private, handwritten ledger. Inside those pages lay the unfalsifiable truth of every single black market dollar Arthur had moved through his firm. I reached down, picked up the legal notice, and ripped it cleanly in half. The corporate war was officially declared, and my boss was about to find out that the numbers never lie. To understand how a brilliant billionaire could turn into an absolute monster who would try to destroy an innocent employee, you have to go back to the day I was hired at Vance Financial Group. 7 years ago, I was a young, intensely dedicated accountant working long hours at a small, low-paying tax firm downtown. I had a rare, near-photographic memory for balance sheets and mathematical patterns. I could look at a 500-page corporate ledger and spot a single mismatched penny within minutes. Arthur Vance discovered me during a routine state audit of one of his smaller logistics companies. He walked into my cramped cubicle, wearing a custom-tailored suit that cost more than my entire annual rent, and looked over my analytical reports with sharp, calculating eyes. "Clara, you have a once-in-a-generation mind for financial structural analysis," Arthur told me, his voice carrying a warm, deeply fatherly tone that instantly made me feel valued. "But you are completely wasting your talent here chasing small-time tax filers. Come work for me at the master firm. I will make you the lead senior financial auditor of our primary investment fund. I will give you a beautiful corner office, a massive salary, and a place where your honesty will be the shield of this company. Together, we will protect the wealth of thousands of regular citizens who trust us with their life savings." I was young, incredibly naive, and desperately wanted to make my late father proud. My dad had been a simple, honest high school math teacher who always taught me that numbers were the most sacred, truthful language in the universe. I looked at Arthur Vance and saw a visionary leader, a protective mentor who wanted to build an empire of absolute integrity. I accepted the offer on the spot. For the first 4 years, my life felt like a beautiful, golden dream. I worked grueling 80-hour weeks, personally reviewing the investment portfolios of high-net-worth clients, ensuring every single transaction was perfectly compliant with federal financial laws. My audits were flawless, and because of my precise work, Vance Financial Group secured massive new funding from major institutional banks. Arthur praised me in front of the entire board of directors, calling me the absolute moral conscience of the company. But as the company's wealth expanded into the tens of millions, the atmosphere in the penthouse executive suite began to transform into something deeply unsettling. Arthur stopped focusing on regular investment funds and became intensely obsessed with creating complex, multi-layered offshore holding companies in Panama and Luxembourg. Whenever I requested the underlying asset verification sheets for these new offshore accounts, Arthur would gently pat my shoulder, flash that warm, disarming mentor smile, and give a quiet sigh of practiced superiority. Clara, my dear, you understand standard domestic accounting, but you don't understand high-level international tax optimization. These holding structures are entirely legal vehicles to protect our client reserves from excessive federal regulation. Don't worry about the specific source codes, just focus on balancing the domestic ledger. Trust your CEO. And because I trusted him, because I viewed him as family, I kept my head down. I had no idea that while I was keeping the company's public books completely pristine, my boss was using my impeccable reputation as a shield to hide a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. The turning point occurred during my 6th year at the firm. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, long after the office lights had been turned off and the rest of the staff had gone home. I was sitting alone in my corner office, trying to balance the end-of-year clearing ledger for our primary European investment branch. A strange, recurring $500 discrepancy kept appearing at the bottom of our asset column, a tiny, almost invisible error that any other accountant would have simply written off as a standard bank transit fee. But my mind couldn't let it go. I decided to log into the deep, back-end server architecture of the company's digital transaction logs to trace the specific routing history of that $500. As I bypassed the public user interface and entered the raw database codes, my monitor screen suddenly began to flash with thousands of rapid, automated entries. The small $500 discrepancy wasn't a bank fee. It was an automated digital mask. A clever piece of malicious software that was designed to camouflage a massive, hidden pipeline of capital. My breath caught in my throat as I traced the true data path. Every single afternoon at exactly 4:15 p.m., just 15 minutes after the stock market closed, the software was automatically siphoning small fractions of money from thousands of regular client retirement accounts. It would bundle these fractions into a single mass wire transfer of nearly $400,000, route it through a ghost holding company registered in Delaware, and dump the cash directly into a private wealth account in Switzerland, owned by an entity called Vance Global Holdings. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning as the terrifying reality hit me like a physical blow. Arthur wasn't optimizing taxes. He was systematically robbing his own clients, regular, hard-working people who had trusted him with their retirement savings. Over the last 3 years alone, this hidden pipeline had moved over $42 million of stolen wealth into his private Swiss vault. The very next morning, I walked straight into Arthur's magnificent penthouse office, my hands trembling as I laid the printed server routing codes onto his glass desk. "Arthur, we have a catastrophic security breach in the database," I said, my voice cracking with absolute shock. "Someone has installed a malicious software program that is siphoning millions from our clients' retirement funds into a Swiss account called Vance Global Holdings. We need to notify the federal financial regulators immediately and shut down the servers." Arthur didn't flinch. He didn't look surprised. He slowly closed his laptop, stood up from his leather chair, and walked over to the massive glass window, looking out over the city. When he turned back to face me, the warm, fatherly mentor persona had completely vanished. His face was entirely cold, hard, and filled with a terrifying, absolute arrogance. "Clara, I am going to give you one single opportunity to take those papers off my desk, walk back to your office, and forget you ever looked at the back-end database," Arthur said, his voice dropping into a low, deadly whisper. "Vance Global Holdings belongs to me. That capital is funding a massive international real estate acquisition that will secure this firm's dominance for the next 50 years. The clients won't miss a few pennies from their balances." "This is grand larceny, Arthur," I shouted, the raw anger burning in my chest. "I am the senior financial auditor of this firm. My name is stamped on the annual compliance reports. If I hide this, I am a co-conspirator to federal fraud. I won't do it. I am going to the SEC. Arthur let out a short, mocking chuckle, stepping directly into my space. Go to the regulators, Clara. With what proof? You think the federal authorities are going to take the word of a regular employee over a man who funds political campaigns and sits on the municipal bank board? The digital signature certificate that authorized every single one of those Swiss transfers belongs to your personal laptop ID. If the authorities investigate this firm, the data trail will show that you stole that money, not me. I built this playground, Clara. If you turn on me, I will ensure you spend the rest of your life inside a federal prison cell. Now get out of my office. I walked out of the corporate tower that afternoon in a state of absolute suffocating terror. I realized that if I went to the police immediately, Arthur's high-priced corporate defense lawyers would instantly manipulate the evidence, use the planted digital signatures to frame me, and destroy my credibility before a grand jury could even be formed. I was entirely isolated, trapped inside a corporate fortress designed to crush whistleblowers. That night, I sat on my living room floor, staring at my father's old math journals. I remembered what he always told me. The digital world can be wiped out with a single keystroke, Clara. If you want to keep a record that can never be hacked, never altered, and never forged, you write it down with ink on paper. Human handwriting carries its own absolute proof of truth. That was the night I began my secret project. Every single evening for the next year, I stayed late at the office under the pretense of working on regular compliance audits. But in reality, I was secretly printing out the raw data packets, the offshore wire reference codes, and the hidden system logs from Arthur's Swiss pipeline. I smuggled the pages out of the building inside my creative design folders. When I got home, I manually transcribed every single transaction into a private, leather-bound accounting ledger. I wrote down the dates, the exact dollar amounts, the fake Delaware shell companies, and the specific security keys Arthur used to move the stolen funds. Beside each entry, I pasted the physical corporate transit receipts that carried Arthur's actual, hand-signed authorizations from the executive suite. I kept this ledger hidden inside a hollowed-out compartment beneath the hardwood floorboards of my study, covered by a heavy wool rug. It was my invisible shield, the only piece of unhackable evidence that could prove my innocence when the storm finally hit. The trap officially sprung on a cold Thursday morning, precisely 1 year after I discovered the fraud. I arrived at the Vance Financial Tower to find 2 armed private security guards standing outside my corner office. My desk drawers had been completely ripped open, my personal computer tower had been seized, and sitting in my chair was Arthur's lead litigation attorney, Mr. Bradley, a notoriously ruthless corporate lawyer known for destroying anyone who threatened the firm's elite clients. Clara Miller, your employment with Vance Financial Group is terminated immediately, Mr. Bradley announced, his voice completely devoid of any human empathy. Our internal security team has just concluded a comprehensive digital forensic audit of the investment reserves. We have uncovered definitive, undeniable proof that you have used your senior auditor access codes to embezzle $12 million of client funds into an unauthorized offshore account. The firm has filed a formal civil lawsuit against you for full restitution, and a criminal warrant has been referred to the state prosecutor. Security will escort you from the premises immediately. I looked across the hallway and saw Arthur standing by the elevator doors. He didn't say a word. He simply raised his glass of scotch toward me, a slow, mocking smirk spreading across his face as the security guards grabbed my arms and marched me out of the building in front of all my coworkers. They had taken my office, wiped my company servers, and launched a multi-million-dollar legal execution block to destroy my life before the sun could even set. The next 6 months were a complete descent into living hell. Arthur didn't just sue me. He launched a total scorched earth campaign to ensure I couldn't mount a defense. Using his massive influence on the municipal banking board, he pressured my banks to freeze my personal checking and savings accounts under the pretense of asset preservation for the pending fraud case. I found myself trapped in a state of absolute financial paralysis. I had to borrow money from my elderly aunt just to purchase groceries, while Arthur hired Vanguard Legal, the most aggressive, high-priced corporate defense firm in the state, to handle the lawsuit. Every single day, the local business news websites published devastating articles about me, featuring my corporate headshot with massive, humiliating headlines. Senior auditor accused of plundering retirement funds. Vance Group demands $12 million in restitution. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and the overwhelming weight of the isolation felt like a concrete block crushing my chest. My attorney, Mr. Henderson, a brave, sharp-witted trial lawyer who took my case pro bono out of respect for my late father, sat with me in his small, dusty office downtown, looking over the lawsuit files with an incredibly grave expression. "Clara, they have built a terrifyingly clean digital trap," Henderson said, rubbing his eyes in exhaustion. "Their legal team has submitted over 2,000 pages of digital server logs to the court. Every single line shows that the unauthorized transfers were authorized using your unique employee token and your personal laptop's IP address. In the eyes of the law, electronic server records are considered gold standard evidence. If we walk into that courtroom with nothing but your word against their servers, Judge Harrison is going to rule against us in the first 10 minutes. We need an absolute miracle to break their narrative." "We don't need a miracle, Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice dropping into a cold, dangerous register that made him look up in surprise. I reached into my briefcase and laid the heavy, leather-bound book onto his desk. "We have my private ledger. Arthur thinks that because he completely wiped the company's digital servers, the paper trail is gone forever. He forgot that the physical laws of accounting cannot be erased by an IT department. This book contains the exact, handwritten transit keys for every dollar he stole, alongside the original corporate receipts he signed before he tried to frame me." Henderson opened the leather book, his eyes widening into 2 circles of pure, unadulterated shock as he turned the pages. He scanned the neat, handwritten columns of numbers, the precise mathematical proofs, and the physical signature receipts pasted onto the parchment. "Clara, this isn't just a defense ledger," Henderson whispered, his voice trembling with a sudden, intense excitement. "This is an absolute masterpiece of forensic financial analysis. If these signature receipts are verified by a certified handwriting expert, this book won't just dismiss Arthur's lawsuit. It will turn his multi-million-dollar corporate execution block into the very weapon that will lock his prison cell door shut." "We are not going to show this ledger to their legal team during the pre-trial discovery meetings, Mr. Henderson," I instructed, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across my lips. "If we reveal it now, Arthur's lawyers will find a way to tie it up in endless procedural motions, file confidentiality holds, or claim the book was fabricated. We are going to allow them to believe they have won. We will walk straight into that summary judgment hearing, let Arthur state his lies under oath to the judge, and spring the trap when he thinks I have 0 cards left to play." Thursday morning arrived with a blinding, fierce autumn storm that slammed against the massive granite pillars of the County District Courthouse. Inside Courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was thick, solemn, and charged with an immense, high-stakes legal energy. The room was beautiful, lined with ancient oak panels, high leather chairs, and a massive judicial bench where Judge Harrison sat, his sharp gray eyes reviewing the thick case folders. Arthur Vance sat at the petitioner's table, looking like a glorious king ready to receive his final inheritance. His hair was perfectly styled, his gold watch glinted under the lights, and his lead attorney, Mr. Bradley, was smirking arrogantly as he arranged his heavy binders of digital evidence. When Mr. Henderson and I walked to our table, we brought no large crates of files. We brought no tech assistants or digital display monitors. I sat down quietly, wearing a simple black dress, holding nothing but a battered leather briefcase on my lap. Arthur leaned over his table, catching my eye through the space between our chairs, and gave me that slow, mocking smirk that had once made my stomach turn with fear. Now, it just looked completely pathetic. "Your Honor," Mr. Bradley stood up, his booming corporate voice instantly filling the courtroom with an immense, arrogant confidence. "We are here today to request an immediate summary judgment and an order of full financial restitution against the respondent, Clara Miller. For 6 months, we have presented clear, notarized server logs from Vance Financial Group showing that Ms. Miller used her unique senior auditor credentials to plunder $12 million from our client's retirement funds. The respondent has produced 0 alternative digital records, 0 tech experts, and has failed to provide a single digital file to dispute these certified server stamps. Clara Miller is a clever white-collar thief who used her position of trust to line her own pockets. We ask this court to award full judgment to my client today and refer this matter directly to the state prosecutor for immediate criminal arrest. Judge Harrison leaned forward, looking down over his glasses at our table, his face incredibly grave. Mr. Henderson, this court has given your client multiple extensions to produce an operational server audit or a viable technical defense. As it stands, the electronic evidence trail submitted by the petitioner is heavily documented. Do you have any verifiable evidence or live testimony to introduce before I rule on this summary motion? Arthur's grin widened to his ears. He leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his legs, completely convinced that the next 10 seconds would mark the official end of my life. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Henderson said calmly, standing up and unbuttoning his coat. We have a critical piece of primary physical evidence to introduce to this court today, a piece of evidence that will clarify the exact reality of how these offshore transfers were authorized. We call the respondent, Clara Miller, to the stand to present her private ledger. Mr. Bradley let out a loud, dismissive laugh from the petitioner's table. Objection, Your Honor. This is a desperate, pathetic stalling tactic. The defense has no alternative server records listed on the docket. This is immediate impeachment evidence regarding a massive, multi-million-dollar fraud committed directly against this court, Your Honor, Henderson countered, his voice ringing with a sudden, sharp authority. And our evidence cannot be hacked. Step up to the box and be sworn in, Ms. Miller, Judge Harrison ordered, his gavel coming down with a sharp crack that silenced the laughing lawyers. I stood up slowly, walked past Arthur's smirking form, and climbed the steps to the elevated witness stand. I placed my hand on the legal Bible, took a deep, steady breath, and swore to tell the absolute truth under penalty of felony perjury. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out the heavy, leather-bound handwritten ledger, and laid it directly onto the wooden podium in front of me. Ms. Miller, Mr. Henderson began, walking over to the stand. The petitioner claims that their corporate digital servers contain the absolute, unfalsifiable truth of who authorized the theft of $12 million. Can you explain to this court what that book in front of you represents? This book is my private, handwritten financial ledger, I announced into the microphone, my voice sounding incredibly clear, steady, and entirely unyielding. For 3 years, while serving as senior financial auditor, I discovered that Arthur Vance was using an automated software program to systematically steal fractions of money from thousands of regular client retirement accounts. Knowing that he owned the company's digital servers and was actively planting fake electronic signatures on my laptop ID to frame me, I manually transcribed every single illegal transaction into this book, using ink on paper the moment they occurred. Arthur instantly slammed his hands onto his table, his face flushing with rage as he shouted toward the bench. This is an absolute outrage, Your Honor. This woman is an accused thief who has brought a handwritten notebook of fairy tales into a professional courtroom. You cannot allow this garbage to be entered into evidence. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Judge Harrison roared, his voice exploding through the courtroom with an immense authority that made Arthur instantly freeze. One more outburst like that, and I will have the bailiffs place you in immediate custody for contempt. Mr. Henderson, continue. Ms. Miller, Henderson said, pointing to the book. Does that handwritten ledger contain anything other than your mathematical analysis? Yes, Your Honor, I said, opening the book to the center pages and looking directly at Judge Harrison. Pasted beside every single handwritten transaction line are the physical, paper internal transit receipts that carried the authorization codes for the Swiss bank wires. Every single one of these physical papers carries the original, ink-written signature of Arthur Vance himself, signed inside his private penthouse office before he transferred the funds. A digital server log can be altered by an IT director, Your Honor, but a physical, handwritten signature on vintage corporate transit paper cannot be forged by a server code. Mr. Bradley's face instantly turned a sickly shade of pale gray. He looked over at Arthur, his mouth swinging open in absolute shock as my attorney slid a certified report from the state's leading forensic handwriting analyst directly onto the judge's bench. Your Honor, Henderson announced triumphantly. We have submitted a certified forensic graphological report confirming that the signatures inside Clara Miller's private ledger are 100% authentic and match Arthur Vance's handwriting perfectly. The data in this ledger matches the Swiss wire reference numbers exactly, proving that Arthur Vance stole $42 million from his own clients and used his corporate servers to create a fake digital paper trail to frame his auditor. The courtroom fell into an absolute suffocating silence, so deep you could hear the steady rhythm of the rain hitting the windows outside. Judge Harrison slowly reviewed the handwritten pages of my ledger, his sharp eyes scanning the neat columns of numbers and the physical signature receipts pasted onto the parchment. As he read the precise data logs mapping out the exact Delaware shell companies and the private Swiss bank routing keys, his facial expression transformed from deep skepticism into pure, unadulterated, judicial disgust. He looked down from his high marble bench, his piercing gaze fixing directly onto Arthur Vance. "Mr. Vance," Judge Harrison said, his voice dropping into a low, terrifyingly calm rumble that carried the immense weight of the law. "In my 25 years on this bench, I have rarely witnessed a display of such calculated, malicious, and arrogant depravity. You didn't just come to this court to file a civil lawsuit. You came to use the sacred machinery of justice as an execution weapon to bury an innocent woman and hide a multi-million-dollar grand larceny against thousands of regular citizens." "Your Honor, please, it's a fabricated notebook. She wrote those lines herself to blackmail me," Arthur whispered, his smooth corporate voice completely breaking, turning into a high-pitched, pathetic gasp as a heavy layer of cold sweat covered his forehead, dripping onto his pristine suit jacket. "Silence, sir!" Judge Harrison snapped, slamming his heavy wooden gavel down with a resounding crack that echoed through the room like a thunderbolt. "The forensic graphological report matches your handwriting perfectly. A paper trail of ink and physical receipts doesn't lie, Mr. Vance. Your expensive digital server logs are a proven criminal forgery." The judge turned his sharp gaze toward the two armed county sheriffs standing by the double courtroom doors. "Bailiffs, take the petitioner, Arthur Vance, into immediate, non-bailable custody," Judge Harrison commanded, pointing a stern finger at my trembling former boss. "This civil lawsuit is dismissed with absolute prejudice. Furthermore, I am issuing an immediate judicial order to freeze every domestic and international asset linked to Vance Financial Group, and I am turning this private ledger over to the Federal White-Collar Task Force for immediate processing on charges of grand larceny, wire fraud, felony extortion, and systemic perjury. Get him out of my sight." The two large bailiffs stepped forward quickly, their heavy boots echoing against the floorboards as they intercepted Arthur. Before his smooth-talking lawyer could even file an objection, they pulled Arthur's arms forcefully behind his back, and the sharp, metallic click of steel handcuffs echoed through the silent space. The multi-millionaire corporate giant began to openly weep, his legs buckling pathetically beneath him as they dragged him down the center aisle of courtroom 4B, his custom designer shoes scraping against the floor until the heavy doors swung shut behind him, removing him from my life forever. The storm of the legal battle cleared within 3 weeks, leaving a beautiful, brilliant autumn sun to shine over the city. With Arthur Vance sitting inside a secure federal detention facility awaiting his formal criminal indictment, the federal financial regulatory authorities moved with an incredible, unbending speed. Using the precise mathematical maps provided by my private handwritten ledger, the Federal White-Collar Crime Task Force successfully penetrated the private wealth vault in Switzerland, seizing all $42 million of Arthur's hidden capital. Every single penny was legally restored directly back into the retirement and investment accounts of the regular, hard-working clients he had robbed. Because of my immense courage and the absolute unhackable precision of my accounting work, the State Banking Board formally appointed me as the independent trustee and chief liquidation director of Vance Financial Group. My name wasn't ruined. It was featured on the front pages of international financial journals, labeling me the ultimate champion of white-collar accountability. The morning after my official appointment, I walked back into the corporate tower, no longer an employee being marched out by security, but as the sole director in charge of the empire. When I stepped out of the elevator into the master penthouse suite, the entire remaining staff, the accountants, the auditors, the analysts, and the office clerks, were all standing in the long hallway. The moment they saw me, they broke into a loud, roaring standing ovation that filled the entire glass tower. They weren't clapping for a flashy billionaire in a custom suit. They were welcoming the real engine of truth back to the drafting table. I walked into Arthur's former office, opened the heavy velvet curtains to let the warm sunlight flood the room, and sat down at the large glass desk. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out my father's old math journals and my private leather-bound ledger, and placed them right in the center of the polished glass. A profound, deep sense of absolute peace finally settled into my soul. The clients were safe, the workers were protected, and the books were completely clean. As I watch the sun set over the city skyline from my executive office window today, a profound, quiet reflection fills my soul. Our modern corporate world has become completely obsessed with digital systems, cloud servers, and complex automated software. We celebrate the smooth talkers, the powerful CEOs, and the elite strategists who spend their lives looking for high-level shortcuts, hiding their greed behind digital encryption keys, and believing they can manipulate numbers to erase the regular people who perform the actual labor in the shadows. They truly believe that an elite corporate title and a multi-million-dollar legal team give them the power to rewrite reality. But this long, painful journey taught me the ultimate moral lesson of human life. A company, a career, and a legacy cannot be sustained by empty promises, digital fabrications, and systemic deception. True success and enduring honor aren't found in the wealth you can steal through an anonymous server code. They are built on the unshakable foundation of character, honesty, sweat, and integrity. My father was completely right. The digital world can be manipulated with a single keystroke, but a physical line of ink written on paper carries its own absolute, unfalsifiable truth. Arthur Vance tried to use his massive corporate empire to ruin my life and steal from innocent citizens. But in his blind arrogance, he forgot that the laws of mathematics cannot be cheated forever. When you stand firmly on the side of honesty, fairness, and dedicated truth, the elaborate webs of the deceptive will always unravel under the bright light of justice. And when the final smoke of the battle clears, the greedy are left with nothing but their empty cell walls and broken promises, while the quiet keepers of the truth inherit the magnificent kingdoms they protected with their own two hands.